everyone, welcome to Writers of the World. Today we're discussing living and writing in a pandemic. We have a very highly accomplished panel with us with a wide variety of perspectives, insights, and experiences into the topic. If you could each please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Gayle Woodson. I am a retired surgeon and also a writer. And I've published a book about my work in Africa. It's called After Kilimanjaro.
Hi, I'm Donna O'Donnell Figurski, and I am a speaker and the author of my award-winning book, Prisoners Without Bars, A Caregiver's Tale, about being a caregiver for my husband, David, who had a traumatic brain injury in 2005. I also host a radio show on the Brain Injury Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mary Plouffe. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice and the author of I Know It in My Heart, Walking Through Grief with a Child. I write about grief at all stages of life, but right now in my pandemic retreat, I'm writing about the evolution of childhood grief throughout the childhood years.
I'm Jeanne Felfe. I'm a fiction and nonfiction author, a freelance editor, and book formatter, and the president of Saturday Writers, which is a 100-plus member writers guild here around close to me. My women's fiction novel, Bridge to Us, is explore second chances, and it's fun learning how to love yourself without giving yourself away.
Hi, I'm Deb Brandon. I am a retired mathematician. I'm the author of But My Brain Had Other Ideas, a memoir of recovery from brain injury. I started writing about my journey to help me understand my new post-injury life. And in time, the project grew from a journal into an award-winning book.
Hi, I'm Jodé Millman. My debut novel, The Midnight Call, just recently won the 2020 Bronze Ippy Award and also won an American Fiction Award for Best Legal Thriller. In addition to being a writer, I'm an attorney and a podcaster, and my podcast is Backstage with the Bardavon Theater here in Poughkeepsie, New York. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
So the first question is, I'd like to approach the topic from as many angles as possible and ask each of the panelists to talk about their own experiences, as well as any insights and points of view they'd like to discuss on living and writing in a pandemic.
Wow, living and writing in a pandemic is something brand new, something that none of us have ever had to do before, because the last pandemic was in 12, 13, 14 area. And I don't believe any of us were there at that point. So yeah, so it's a brand new area that we're looking at. And so one of the things that I am doing is, everybody's life has been pulled backwards. We're not doing everything that we normally did before, obviously. I was involved in the theater on March 13th. My show was canceled. I have another show coming up in December. We're still on hold. Don't even think that's going to happen. So things are really changing. And I thought for me, I would never, ever be able to deal with a week of not being able to do things. And right now it's been 6 months and I've been hunkered down. And we don't go out other than going for groceries, which we've only done 3 times, and a couple doctor's appointments. So literally, I don't speak to anybody, see anybody except on Zoom. And Zoom has really opened my life up for a whole lot of different things, including something like this, the panels that we're doing on. I met 4 lovely women that I have never met before, and 2 that I get to see occasionally, or get to talk to occasionally. So that's always kind of fun. It's opened up more. I've had birthday parties on Zoom, not mine, but we've had family birthday parties where we all get together. I've reunited with the Nutley Little Theater in New Jersey, because I used to be very active in there and be on the board and be backstage and on stage and I thought that was all gone, but now I'm in their meetings again. I'm watching their presentations again. And so that's really fun. Another thing that's opened up for me is the Montclair Write Group, which I have been a very active, I had been a very active member, never gave up my membership, even though I live out here in the desert now, far from New Jersey, but I still keep very much in contact with them. And again, I get to go to their different readings and things. I get to read for them on Zoom. So I'm getting to see people that I hadn't seen again in a long time, and that's really very cool.
So I'm kind of the opposite of Donna. You sound very much like an extrovert, and I'm very much an introvert. So for me, staying at home, this is normal for me, totally normal. Then I'm not able to see my out-of-state kids and grandkids. But my writing life has sort of taken a weird twist. I'm the president of Saturday Writers, as I mentioned, and we met at a local library. We had a wonderful, great venue that we had just gotten into in January. We'd worked for 2 years to get in there, and we got in there, got to meet twice, and then they shut it down. And I was left wondering, what are we supposed to do now? Because we can't meet. And so I started investigating the online venues, and I tried 3 different ones, and Zoom was the best for what we needed. So now we're holding our monthly meetings on Zoom. And it's been kind of interesting because we usually have between 65 and 70 people at a meeting. Mm-hmm. And our first meeting on Zoom, we had 45 people, including some who have been able to come to one of our meetings because they don't live in the area. They're members because they like for a contest, but they don't live here, so they can't come. And a couple of people who are disabled have been able to come. For me, that's really good to be able to pull in some people who would not have otherwise been able to attend. And now we've got, as odd as it sounds, we've done write-ins over Zoom, we do open mics over Zoom, and we have 4 different critique groups that have decided to meet over Zoom, and people are just loving it. As far as my own writing, I sort of fell into a hole when this first started and became really addicted to the news and found myself trying to find out all I could, but I wasn't doing anything. It was just sort of spinning my wheels. So I had to stop and back up and kind of tell myself, this could last a while. If this lasts a while, are you going to be happy with what you've done during this period of time? And the answer was no. I pulled out the novel I was working on, and I finished it, got it out to my beta readers, and I've gotten their feedback, and now I need to go through it and start making the changes that will make this a stronger story. But it was just sort of weird to really just step into that and look at how can I do this differently. And one of the things that I've enjoyed doing, I'm also an editor. And I found this really delightful woman who needed some help. She's 87 years old. She's a former nun, and she needed somebody to really help her put her memoir together. And so we've been working together. We haven't done Zoom yet, but we're going to, so that I can show her how to upload her book to Amazon and do all of that kind of thing. She has no idea how to do any of this. So we've done the editing, the formatting's done, and she's getting really excited, and that excites me because she's, she uses a computer, which is awesome, but she doesn't really understand all the back workings of it. Zoom, and I'm going to help her through it step by step how to do this.
Basically, even though we're in a pandemic, the Zoom, it seems like a little bit of a silver lining.
Yes.
I like it with people, celebrities Zooming, or even the newscasters, and you see what their house is like and what kind of plants they have and what kind of furniture, or you see them without their hair done or no makeup, and I really enjoy that.
I do too. I like the newscasters in regular clothes.
Yeah. Well, I get fascinated too much with the background sometimes and what it says about people.
Have you noticed how everybody is in front of bookshelves? And that's become a big thing because it's been a means for promoting, the agendas of the person who's sitting there. Jimmy Fallon will have out what he's most recently reading, It's kind of interesting.
It looks like it's at least, you know, when people do that, they have a high regard for reading and for books, and that's all.
true. That's true.
I got a green screen last week so that I can put other things, but I didn't use it tonight. Sometimes I put Mount Kilimanjaro behind me. Sometimes I put, you know, snowmobiles. But I thought, well, just be in my office this time.
Did you say you have a green screen, Gayle?
Yes, I got it from Amazon.
So how do you use that? Do you do post editing and you put different backgrounds in post?
No, you just put the green screen behind you, and then you go down, and in the lower left corner where it says stop video, instead of stopping video, there's a little arrow that you click and it says change virtual background. So then you can load up these pictures you want behind you. And so you can, I wanted to find the inside of Mar-a-Lago and pretend like but I haven't found that picture. But yeah, so it took me a while to figure it out, but it's kind of fun.
It doesn't work very well without a green screen. It gets all pixelated if you don't.
Oh yeah, it's really weird with that. I put a blue trash bag behind me once, and that worked pretty well. But the green screen, I got it from Amazon, and it was only $16. But then when it came, it's just this green fabric. It didn't have the thing to hang it on. So then I had to order the thing that you hang it on, and that was like $40 or something. But it's worth it. It's fun.
That's a lot of fun. That's great. You can also just have Mount Everest, like you're
Yes.
on the summit, in normal day clothes.
So for me, going back to what we were talking about, for me, the pandemic, the whole lockdown thing started at a interesting time in my life. I was about to retire. And so I had to deal with the teaching online stuff, which I came to the realization that I didn't like it because of the talking heads format. I didn't like that. And I felt like if you're trying to engage students who've grown up with video games, that's not the way to go. But I retired in time that I don't have to do it this semester, so I was very happy about that. And I'm a person who loves teaching. But it forced me to learn more about the technology, which was a great introduction to what I was hoping to do when I retired. My one issue, the one thing I was anxious about with retiring was how would writing work for me in terms of doing it without structure? And because people were reaching out through various things, including Zoom, there was more stuff available for writers, for instance, workshops that were cheap or free, groups getting together to work together while they were on Zoom, this kind of thing, or write while you're together to be accountable to each other. And so all this was exploding around me, so it really set me up for what is now my daily life. I belong to a group of, we do Power Hour for freelance writers. I've started a group for, that we sit and we check in with each other, and then what we're going to do, and then for the hour we do whatever it is, and then we check in and bounce ideas off each other with things that we had trouble with. Or
is that just for writing, Deb, or is that for anything?
No, this is just for writing.
Okay.
I mean, I've and like Donna, I organized a family reunion through Zoom, and that was fantastic because we're talking 3 continents here.
Mm-hmm.
And we normally can't get together, and we were all there. I mean, how many of us? I don't know how many. I mean, we're talking siblings, nephews and nieces, and we were, and also grandnephews and nieces, and we all had goofy grins on our faces throughout. I mean, we hadn't been able to be with each other for decades. So from my standpoint, I really got all the gains out of it, as I said, in terms of writing, in terms of my life. And like Jeanne, I'm quite happy to live in my cave. So in terms of not much contact with other people, sometimes it's great. So
I left my office on a Thursday, didn't even bring my laptop home. By Sunday night, it was clear that I wasn't going back, and that was the end of March. So it all happened very quickly for me, and transitioning people that I see clinically to Zoom or FaceTime or a private practice modality is a major challenge. Well, the interesting thing for me clinically was to see how the overlay of the demands of the pandemic and isolation interacted with the problems that people were coming to talk about. And in the early stages, there were some people who had problems with anxiety that were made worse. There were others who almost felt a relief at being constrained and kept home and not allowed to run the way they normally did, which was part of their anxiety problems. So for me, it made the clinical work almost double layered. And it was interesting to see. I had those who were dealing with grief and loss and death and dying in a strange sort of way, felt not alone in their grief. We were all grieving. And in fact, the first week I was home, I sat and wrote, and the first sentence that came out was, "We are all grieving now. We are grieving our freedom, our fearlessness, and our futures." Mm-hmm. And that is no small thing. And I really started to think about how that was not just the behavioral grief of not being able to do what we normally do, but the grief of not knowing how long this was going to last, and of almost not wanting to imagine a trip or plans, because we really don't know what the future was going to be. So it really it was 3 levels: behavioral, emotional, and planning, which is usually our escape valve. If we're home sick for 6 months, we have that to look forward to. So I look at all of this sort of through the lens of grief and where grief takes us. The interesting thing about that piece of writing was that I instantly thought about the fact that my parents and my grandparents lived through World War II and the Depression. And this was going to be our moment in time to have that kind of experience. My parents had to delay their wedding 3 or 4 years, and as wedding gifts, they got gas rationing cards to be able to go away for a weekend honeymoon. And there was a strong sense of what I call the habits of depression and the habits of World War II that they held for a lifetime. And many of them were good habits. They were the habits of frugality and sharing and reaching out to others and making do, as my mother used to say, with whatever you have. And so I kept thinking about how can I use this time, not just to fill it, but also to create something that I will be proud to say in 100 years I did because of the coronavirus, not just instead of what I would normally do. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of the story of grief and how we create meaning as we move from acute grief to adaptive grief to integrated grief, that I've been thinking a lot about and writing about in this pandemic, and how we can find a way to turn what's happened to us not just into something we can survive, but that's something we look back on and are really glad that we experienced. So,
what sort of adaptive grief did you see, Mary?
Well, I think the notion that this is not just being deprivation and loss, but this is time given to us. You know, for myself, I thought, you are trapped at home. What do you want to do? What would you do if you were given this chunk of time with none of the stress? And I understand that's not possible, but I at least wanted to think about the phrase create meaning. When we do a good job of grieving, no matter how deep and heavy our loss is, we find meaning in that loss. We find something about what we cannot change and what has been taken from us, and we turn that around into something. My book, for example, certainly was my way of trying to create meaning out of the loss of my sister and having to nurture her 3-year-old daughter through years and years of painful loss of her mother. And I think looking at this as an opportunity to create meaning, and as I said, for me, I went back to, this is the first time in my generation that I have ever been asked to do anything that puts the public good, the universal good, above my own life and my own needs and my own wants. And I kind of really have been playing a lot with that. What do I want 100 years from now? My grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know about how I used this time. So that's really sort of where I went with it. We talk about grief and gratitude being really important. So that is a part of it. What am I grateful for? How can I focus on that? I think the other thing was simply to do some things in addition to doing the things I needed to do some things I would never think of doing. One for me was to say, I'm going to pull out some opera CDs that I bought on an anniversary trip years ago, and I haven't even broken the plastic on them. So I want to use some of this time for things that I never would have found the time to do.
As a brain injury survivor, it was interesting for me to see, because as a brain injury survivor, you have to adapt and readapt and adjust and readjust almost on a daily basis. I'm sure Donna's seen this sort of thing with caring for her husband. And I think that I adapted to the new situation relatively easily because this is what I do on a daily basis. And I found it interesting to see how other people had so much more trouble adapting. And this thing of grieving for our losses, again, is something that, again, as a brain injury survivor, this is something that's part of who you become. I mean, you've lost your old self. I mean, it's not that grief is no longer a focus of my life, but every so often there's a little bit of a twinge there. It's interesting what you said about learning to go above your own needs. I grew up in Israel, where whenever there was a war, everything went on the wayside. Everything. What was important was the whole. For instance, my reaction to when there's a war now in Israel was, I want to go back. That's my knee-jerk reaction. And you help, you do stuff, you give people much more aware of the whole, and it's like it was in 9/11 here. Yeah.
There's a sense of common purpose, yeah. And there's a sense of coming together in a larger goal that I think we really aren't. We were certainly there after 9/11. I don't think we're quite there now, but it is what I am drawn to try to create and to help those that I work with create, is how can this be something that makes your life larger and better and something you are more proud of, rather than just an experience that you endured and survived and got through by hook or by crook and by Zoom.
I don't think we're even a little bit like after 9/11. I think after 9/11, we did all have purpose. There was only a short period of time that we felt isolated or afraid, but people, you keep hearing it over and over again. We're all in this together. We're not. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat.
Yes.
You've got people on the front lines. You've got people, that have to go to work. That they're in the meat packing plants. They're risking their lives so we can have meat. On the other hand, you have people that can work from home. They can have Zoom. You see people who don't have a job at all. They've lost their jobs. And there's this big divide. You've got the people that are doing so poorly economically, and then you got the people that are, well set up, and the sales of homes now is just through the roof. It's like the inventory has dropped down, prices are zooming up, houses are only staying on the market, maybe 60 days, and the median house price is higher than it's ever been, and it's because the people who can afford, they've got good jobs and they're working from home, they go out and they're wanting to buy bigger houses with a yard, and they're moving out of New York. So, and there's different attitudes. So, there's anti-maskers.
Right.
So we're not all together this time.
I think that's true. I think that is one of the real differences here between the Depression and World War II, is that we don't see it the same way. And that means that, we'll talk about probably this later, but adapting and titrating how much social media and how much political news we all take in is, at least for me, a part of wellness, a part of getting through this in the healthiest way.
I just wanted to piggyback on something Deb said before. As my husband is a brain injury survivor, he wanted me to make sure that people realize that his life hasn't changed much. And for those in a brain injury situation, many of them are confined to home or much more restricted. And so when this happened, for David, it was like, okay, nothing's much different. We went out every Friday night for dinner. Well, so we didn't do that. He went to his doctor appointments. Well, we canceled most of those. So, so things haven't changed too much for him. The one thing I think it has changed, though, is we spend, because I'm not going out myself, I'm not going out to the theater or to run errands or do whatever. We spend a lot more time together, a lot more deeper conversations, longer and deeper conversations. And so I think that's an interesting aspect of what's happened during this pandemic too. And again, for me too, I just find myself, although I used every single moment I possibly could writing before the pandemic, now I have extra time, and it still seems I don't have enough time to get out all the writing done that I want to do. But, and part of that is because I've been taking a lot of classes, writing classes and things like that are very time consuming and require my work every day. But yeah, so I mean, it is affecting us all in different ways. And I think Mary, you were saying, what can you look back on and say that you did that was creative, or something that you actually you contributed? Well, I'm hoping that I'm going to be contributing another book to the world eventually soon. It's done, and the first draft is done, and I'm hoping I can look back on that kind of thing, that I didn't fritter away this time. I am using it.
I think that everybody is putting so much pressure on themselves to be productive.
Yeah, that's true.
And that in itself, I think is just unrealistic for us to learn. Okay, I learned how to cook, or I learned how to knit, or I did this, or I did that. I mean, we have to, what we have to realize is we've been trying to function as human beings during this time. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we still have to worry about paying the bills and going to the grocery store. I mean, with their basic needs that we have to meet as human beings. And I think it's put so much pressure on us to feel that we have to master something else during this time. I think we just have to be.
I think the other compassionate piece of this is to recognize that one of the things I say to people who are grieving all the time is nobody tells you how exhausting it is. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as I frame this as grief, we are all exhausted, and people were very disappointed when they suddenly couldn't learn Italian the first 3 weeks they were home,
Right.
because they couldn't focus, they couldn't get into the flow. They had what we call a hypervigilance and an agitation, which is that all those serotonin, norepinephrine levels and cortisol levels that are elevated, that are exhausting, and that really impact your concentration and attention. So I totally agree with what you're saying. You really have to find different strategies to use your time constructively, but without pressuring yourself with exactly the same schedule or the same expectations that you might have otherwise, because this is a very stressful time, and that uses psychic energy and physical energy.
So for me, the pandemic was, I mean, really, I kind of lost who I am. I'm kind of in suspended animation. In some ways, you know, being isolated, because usually I'm spending time in Africa working at a hospital, time up in Canada, time at home. And when I'm at home, I'm volunteering in the county health clinic. So I haven't seen a patient since February. I feel like a racehorse out in the pasture, and I can hear the bugle blowing at the racetrack, because I'm used to being in there and taking care of people. And that way, you know, during SARS, during H1N1, early days of HIV, it was a lot of it wasn't as bad as catching it on the street, but if you were taking care of patients that had HIV, there are all these ethical issues about how bad does the problem have to be for you to have the risk to operate on them. So that was the first thing I noticed was that, and we've gotten into this very stylized ritual of how the day progresses. As my husband and I, you know, we do certain things at certain times, and at lunchtime I do a Sudoku puzzle. And I've found that it's been really hard for me to work on my novel, because my brain is just so focused on the pandemic, and I'm, you know, researching the illness and its impact, and, you know, writing articles that I post up on Medium or different places, and explaining things to my friends. But it is like my life is kind of in suspended animation.
Do you feel like your friends have turned to you as a resource for information?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing is, you know, I have friends on both red state and blue state friends, and it's nice to be able to avoid political talk and talk about health issues and so forth. But even that is becoming politicized. The health issues are becoming politicized, which is depressing. But yeah, it's nice to be able to explain things to people, because when you're dealing with something that's just so unknown and you don't understand it, I think everybody feels a little bit more control when they can understand, like, okay, what is a virus anyway? Why is it mutating? You know, why is it bad to have it spread through the population? You know, because the more times it's copied in different people, the more the chance there is for a mutation. And then suddenly the vaccine you came up with doesn't work. So there are a lot of medical things about it that I've been really focusing on.
I'd actually like to ask you, Gayle, did you find a lot of misinformation out there, like all over the news and on social media? And was the doctor in you just sort of standing up and saying, what on earth?
You know, I haven't heard things that were that bad, but it's more like, you know, a newscaster will be trying to present a scientific article and they just don't get it quite right. And you know, they're trying their hard. The worst thing was the day that there was a news conference and somebody from the World Health Organization, it was a woman, I'm blocking on her name, but she kind of misspoke, and she said something that asymptomatic transmission is rare, and that wasn't what she meant, but then that's what it all came out, and it was they had to back it up, and it wasn't exactly what she said, but that was how the news people interpreted it.
That's a very important differentiation.
Oh, I know, it's huge. It was a big schmozzle.
What do you think about what people say when they say the World Hysteria Organization? Just an aside, I hear that sometimes.
I hadn't heard that. That's very
No.
depressing. That's very depressing.
I'll
The
edit
problem-
out that question then.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to hear that, because, you know, when people are confused and the information that they're getting keeps changing, they get angry and they want to, like we said before, blame somebody else, or they don't want to trust somebody. And the problem is you have a brand new novel virus. We didn't know much about it at the beginning. And so it was sort of, well, children don't get sick. And wait a minute, children do get the virus. They can spread it. And I have a niece whose little son got that weird Kawasaki post-viral thing where he was in the ICU for a while. And looking back, the family said, gee, we all had really bad flu in March, but nobody knew that it could have been COVID at that time. But the information about the disease just keeps changing. And people are saying, hey, you told us not to wear masks, and now you want us to wear masks. Well, I'm not going to wear one. And that's one of the things that's really sad, because people want to feel like they have some control and like they know what's happening. And it's like after an earthquake, if you live in a place where there's earthquakes, like I lived in California for a while, there's an earthquake, and for the next few days, you don't feel like the earth is stable. You know, you keep expecting things to shift. And I think that's a similar thing now.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, everybody's been talking about time and how they wanted to take the time to do the things, as we said before, you know, learn a new skill or whatever. But in my situation, it was very different, because my time was it was bifurcated, which means it had two different parts. I had my writing life and I had my personal life. Being in New York, we were at the epicenter of the virus at the beginning. I mean, and we could see this, most of us could see this coming a mile away. So as soon as we learned about this, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my baby grandson live in New York City. They came up to live with us. So it's been the first time in 30 years that we've had we've had adult children, grandchildren. There are 3 generations living under my roof right now. So that has totally changed the dynamic of our family, because now I spend a lot of time with my grandson, who ordinarily I wouldn't have seen. I've been very fortunate, you know, I take care of him every day. But then again, I have to put that on the back burner, my family responsibilities on the back burner, and get into my writing life, which are have to be two separate parts of my personality. I was very fortunate when the pandemic struck, in that I didn't have to really worry about, since I'm a novelist, outlining a novel, creating new characters, because I'd already had my book written and I was in the editing stage. So I was able to take this time and just say, you know what, I'm going to edit it. I'm just not going to put any pressure on myself. And besides, who knows what the publishing industry is going to be in the future? And that's something that none of us have even mentioned. Because of the pandemic, there are issues of force majeure, which means that if you have a contract right now, a publishing company can use the pandemic as an excuse to push your book out 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. They can also use it as an excuse not to bring it into print, just have an ebook. So we're all in a field that is really in flux. So as a writer, I had to say, okay, you know, take a step back. I'm going to do the work that I can get done, not put any pressure on myself, and then see what happens. I mean, do any of you have any time restrictions upon which you're living under as far as a publication deadline? No?
No, I'm an indie publisher, so I don't have, my deadlines are mine.
Well, that's good. How
I
about
have a book chapter I have to write for a medical textbook.
So that's, I mean, those are deadlines that are part of our industry. But I think our industry, that's what I've been trying to figure out, how our industry is going to change, and how as writers, I mean, I read an article today in the Publishers Weekly that said that well-known authors are going to do better during the pandemic than debut and lesser known authors. And people are also turning toward reading books that are on their bookshelves already and returning to classics, to things that they haven't had the time to read. So I think our whole industry is going to change.
Jodé, do you think that some publishers are using force majeure in a problematic way?
I think that publishers, and I've gone to a couple of Zoom conferences on that, and I think that publishers have to be realistic about how they're dealing with their authors. They have to have a conversation with them, an open and honest dialogue to say, we're probably not going to be able to get your book out. I mean, there's also maybe a projected paper shortage because a lot of paper comes from Canada. If Canada's having issues, there's not going to be paper. So that's where a lot of the printing is done. So I just think that, I don't think they're being underhanded. I just think they're in flux and they don't know where they're going. But we all should be very happy that there are audiobooks and ebooks, because that's the digital realm is where I think most authors are going to live going forward.
Actually, Jodé, my publisher told me the audiobooks are really going to be hot, and mine is right now. It's at the well, it's been submitted. It's already
Right.
It's gone through its first revision kind of thing, and it should be coming out any day if there are no more glitches. And so I'm really glad.
To Amazon, or how is it being submitted to Audible?
It was submitted to ACX.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
that's another thing. That's what happened. I got caught up in that because my audiobook was supposed to come out, I think, in March. And what happened was ACX, because of COVID, is so backlogged that it used to take them 10 days to review an audiobook. It took them 6 weeks to review my audiobook, and then we had to redo a certain number of the chapters because of the quality standards. I mean, there are all these things that we have no control over.
Exactly. And that's kind of what happened with me. It wasn't 6 weeks. It was probably about 4 weeks. And now it's been out there with them after the corrections were made by my audiographer for about 2 weeks. So I'm just sitting here like, come on.
Right. Come on already, right?
Yeah, I just want it out there.
Could you tell the viewers what tools and skills you drew upon to get through this time? And this can include from the standpoint of health, both mental and physical, wellness, exercise, nutrition, mental stimulation, keeping in touch with friends and family, and so on.
The one thing I would say, people have given sort of concrete examples of what each of us has done. I think about this more as a recipe for wellness. And the first thing I did for myself and also with people I was working with is say, what are the ingredients in your recipe for wellness? Because we all have one and it's usually implicit. We don't write it down, but it includes our physical exercise, spirituality, time in nature, exercise, music. There are many different things and we don't think about it. I find for each person, the constraints of the coronavirus made some adjustments in that recipe. Some of those ingredients are essential. We can't do without them. Others are like spices that I didn't miss it once it was gone. As an introvert, as several others have mentioned, it was almost a relief to let go of some of the social pressures. But to really think about that as that's how you kept your psyche, your body, your soul healthy. And let's look at it together, and that's what I did. What do I need to add? What do I need to replace from the things that were taken so that I can get back into a balance that works for me? And I think that's unique and individual.
Well, when Jodé mentioned we need time to be, what I've done, one of the things I've done is I've taken the time, I mean, every day I go out on the porch, rain or shine, it's got a roof over it type thing. I go and sit there and watch the world go by and just hang out. And just because I feel like I need that time to regroup, to whatever, I just need it. And I feel like it really helps.
The way I'm getting through it is pretty much, I constantly looked at the news, constantly watching the news, and I still do, but I pulled back a lot on that. one of the things that I do, and I know this about me, and it's just the way it works. Whenever anything big happens like this, I kind of stick my head in the sand. I kind of want to ignore it. I want to pretend it's not there, even though I know it's there. But if I focus on it, it's going to be harder to deal with. So what I do is I get busier. And it's probably not healthy. Mary, I can see you grinning over there, and I can see it's probably not healthy, but it's the way I do it. It's what happened when David had his brain injury, and 1 minute he was fine, and the next minute we were looking at 3 brain surgeries. I stuck my head in the sand and pushed forward. Just kept moving forward and doing what I had to do. But if I stopped to think how dreadful this all was and how he might not live through it and that kind of stuff, I couldn't have made it. Now, in the same vein with this pandemic, if I sat there in the beginning and said, oh my gosh, we're going to be in lockdown in our house for 6 months, I would have gone nuts. I mean, crazy. It wouldn't have worked at all for me. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's taking it one day at a time. Yep. And I still read news every day, constantly. I'm on it all day long, but I just stay busy. So I'm working more. I'm marketing. I said earlier, I'm taking children's book writing classes, which is what I used to do. I used to submit picture books a long, long time ago. And when David had his brain injury, that all went to the back burner, and I went to write his book. And now I'm just doing what I have to do there. And so I'm taking the classes. I'm revising children's picture books. I'm just marketing my book that's up here now, keeping overly busy. And I know for Jodé, you're like going, no, stop, do something quiet for yourself. The only thing I can say I do is probably meditate a little bit. I will calm myself down with some nice relaxing music and even now I have my oils going, my infuser, because that makes me feel better. So I don't follow the path that I probably should be following, but it's what works for me. And I think that's what most people have to do, whatever works for them.
I think those are essential words, what works for you.
Right. This year we decided to, we read an article in January that because of the change in New York that farmers were going to have to pay a minimum wage to even part-time and seasonal workers, that they were going to be cutting back on the type of crops that they were going to be growing. So we knew that the farmers markets were going to be extremely limited. So we decided to put a garden in. We put a garden in. And of course, we didn't know what we were doing. I went to the nursery, I got all the plant babies that I got more than we needed. And that was something that, I'm not saying, that and exercise were the two things I think I really did to get outside myself. That when I was back gardening with my hands in the soil, you're not thinking about anything else. Right. And I think that's what we all needed. That was, what Deb was talking about, how you just need some time to sit back and let the world go by.
And we did something kind of daring. We took a road trip.
Whoa, that is daring.
Wow.
It wasn't really planned, but so my daughter was supposed to get married in August, and she's put it off to next year, and maybe it won't, because it was actually, the wedding was going to be up in Newfoundland. So we actually got in the car and drove to my son's house in Atlanta. He just got married in January. They just moved into a new house, and they've all been isolating. It's near Atlanta. It's actually Athens, Georgia. So it was just a one-day trip in the car. The most dangerous thing was going into a toilet in the gas station. I put a KN90 by a mask on for that. And then we hopscotched to the next child's house and the next child. So we saw 3 of the kids. The oldest, Philip, lives in Toronto, and we actually had just visited them before. But I think it was kind of daring, but we, felt like we were, it was like going to the grocery store. You wash your hands, you put your mask on, and we were in kind of safe places all along. And our kids, they're very sweet. They all got tested before we arrived to make sure they wouldn't make us sick. But I think that really helped us because we're used to traveling a lot. Some of our friends did think maybe it was a little irresponsible, but I think we did fine. We didn't get sick.
So you were in an RV, or you drove, or how did you do the
No,
road
it's
trip?
just our car with the dog in the back, and there were a couple of nights that we stayed in a hotel, and the hotels, they have, check in remotely, and everybody wears their masks inside, and it's funny. One place closed down their restaurant and only had room service, and the other place didn't have room service. But we any meals that we had, we ate outdoors, or we'd go to the grocery store and take things with us. But it was really good for us. It kind of broke things up. But the two of us are just like the Bobbsey twins. Our day is just kind of lockstep. We get up, we go for a walk in the morning. We have little different things we do during the morning, and then there's lunch, and then dinner is always very ritualized. The big deal is, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? And we put on, my husband's the music guy. He puts on either opera tonight or jazz or something. So it's not like we planned that we were going to be structured, but it's just, we're just fallen into it. It's very comfortable, and it keeps us from going nuts.
I think there's been an uptick in camping, because people need to get away and they want to be safe, and that's their way of doing it.
Yeah.
RVing too.
Yeah.
Well, I had been threatening for 2 years to get a treadmill and put it in my living room. Now, that sounds like a really weird place to put a treadmill, but I know if I put it upstairs, I'll never see it, I'll never use it. So it is in the living room, and we bought one. I got a great used one, and it's right there to be used. And I hate the cold, and it's going to be getting cold. Even in St. Louis, it gets cold. So this will give me a way to continue to do some sort of exercise when I can't get out and roam around my yard and plant my plants and do what I do when it's my kind of season, which is summer. I'm a hot weather girl. So I got a treadmill, and that's my goal, is to get in there, do 15 minutes a day at least, and try to do something that's not sitting at my computer working, because I'm a workaholic. I feel better when I work. So it's, that's just what I do. That and lists and deadlines. I should know this. I was a project manager for many, many years. I understand deadlines probably better than a lot of people. And, creating my lists and checking them off actually makes me feel better. When I'm not doing that, I don't feel like all my parts are together. So I'm kind of getting back into a routine where it's like, these are the things I have to get done. These are the things I want to get done. And then for me, finding the time in there to making the time to just relax and read for fun, or sit out on the deck with my husband like we did last night. We set out, there was a neighborhood group around the corner from us. We couldn't see them, but we could hear it. They had a big live music thing going on. So we sat on the deck and drank some wine and just enjoyed that. And that for me it's a reminder that I need to kind of take that break and enjoy the little pieces of life.
I like what you said about the lists. Checking each item off creates a sense of accomplishment. So I'd like to thank all our panelists, and for our viewers, remember to subscribe and also check out the panelists' YouTube channels linked in the description below. After Kilimanjaro, Prisoners Without Bars, I Know It in My Heart, Bridge to Us, But My Brain Had Other Ideas, and The Midnight Call are available on Amazon, links below, as well as links to each panelist's website. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Thanks for listening.